They say every empire has its poison. For Rome, that poison wore the face of beauty. She was born into the tangled webs of imperial blood around the year 17 AD. Under the shadow of Augustus himself, her great-granduncle, the founder of the dynasty that would both elevate and devour her, Valeria Messalina entered the world as nobility's darling, daughter of a proud patrician, cousin to the mad Caligula, and kin to the boy who would one day burn the city as Nero. Bred for grace in a family riddled with the sins of gods and men, she was wed before her 18th summer to Emperor Claudius, her first cousin once removed, a man twice her age, frail in body, but heavy with the weight of sudden imperial power. To the citizens of Rome, she was the ideal empress. Gentle, fertile, divine, but behind the marble walls of the Palatine Hill, purity was only a mask. Ancient chroniclers describe her as breathtaking pale skin, golden hair, a softness that could calm storms and ruin men. Her early days seemed virtuous enough. She gave Claudius 2 children, the Princess Octavia and the heir Britannicus, securing her place at the empire's heart. She appeared at rituals with perfect composure, her image etched on coins from distant Crete, a serene goddess beside her limping lord. Yet Rome was a city built on extremes, of power, of pleasure, of pride. And within Messalina, those forces began to twist. She learned quickly that in a world ruled by men, desire could be her weapon, and humiliation her empire. But whispers of her true nature surfaced early, like cracks in polished stone. Even in those first years, she eyed the men around her with a hunger that no crown could sate. Point when her earliest conquest was Appius Silanus, a handsome senator married to her own mother, a forbidden fruit dangling in imperial orchards. In 42 AD, barely a year into Claudius's reign, Messalina summoned him to her bed under the cover of night. Silanus, torn between terror and temptation, yielded once, then fled in horror, begging the emperor for permission to leave Rome. But Messalina was not one to be denied. With the sly aid of the freedman Narcissus, she wove a web of lies, fabricated dreams where Silanus plotted Claudius's murder. The emperor, ever trusting of his young bride, awoke in a panic and ordered the execution before dawn. Silanus died protesting his innocence, his blood the first stain on her path to power. What began as a lover's whim had become a lesson in lethality. Whispers began in the back alleys of Subura. The empress herself disguised as a common prostitute, slipping into the city's dens of pleasure. Under the alias Lysiska, the she-wolf, she haunted the brothels, her golden hair hidden beneath a cheap wig, her silks traded for threadbare rags. Night after night, she would compete with Rome's most infamous courtesans, testing herself not for gold, but for dominance. Even Tacitus wrote that she challenged one of Rome's finest harlots, the notorious Scylla, in a contest of endurance, a marathon of flesh that stretched from dusk to dawn. Pliny the Elder chronicled the madness. 25 men in 24 hours, while her rival collapsed at 7 AT dawn, while others lay spent and shattered, Messalina still stood, untouched, unsatisfied. Juvenal sneered in his satires. She would go to the brothel with her painted face, her hair dressed in the style of a harlot. What began as lust was turning into obsession, and her appetites knew no bounds, not even the stage. She ensnared Nestor, the celebrated pantomime actor whose dances mesmerized the forum, forcing him into her bed under threat of ruin. When he resisted, she whispered to Claudius that the star had seduced her against her will. Nestor was dragged to the arena, his final performance a plea for mercy before the sword fell. Inside the palace, her influence became a shadow government. Banquets turned into carnivals of corruption. Gold cups overflowed with wine. Senators reclined in forced silence as Messalina presided. Half queen, half predator, she summoned gladiators straight from the arena, their sweat-slicked bodies still bearing the scars of survival. Slaves from conquered lands with eyes like distant storms, even sons and daughters of noble families, forcing them to perform her cruel entertainments. Those who refused found their names erased, their bodies floating in the Tiber. Refusal was treason. Compliance was ruin. Her cruelties extended beyond the bedchamber. In 46 AD, she coveted the gardens of Lucullus, a verdant paradise owned by the senator Valerius Asiaticus, and whispered up in the sight of his affair with the beautiful Poppaea Sabina, Messalina's own rival in beauty and bed. Jealousy burned like Greek fire. She accused him of treason, adultery, Even the unspeakable crime of loving men Asiaticus, a hero of the German wars, was denied a trial. He faced death with stoic grace, bathing one last time in his stolen gardens before the hemlock claimed him. The Senate watched in impotent rage, their outrage a silent thunder. She corrupted everything Rome held sacred, even religion, in mockery of Venus. She led rituals that began with prayer and ended in frenzy, wearing priestly robes one moment, tearing them apart the next. She wasn't worshiping the gods. She was declaring herself one, a goddess of lust and fear, enthroned in silk and surrounded by trembling captives. To safeguard her son Britannicus's claim, she turned her blade on kin. In 41 A.D., she exiled Claudius's niece Julia Livilla for her dalliances with the philosopher Seneca, then sealed the order for her execution, a woman's jealousy cloaked as imperial justice. 2 years later, her own niece Julia Livia fell to similar charges. Immorality, incest, whispers of plots against the boy emperor. The girl, barely flowered into womanhood, was starved in a prison cell. Her final breaths a gasp against the bars Messalina's spies fanned through the palaces, rooting out threats like Agrippina the Younger and her son Nero, future flames of Rome's pyre. She even sent assassins to the boy's bed, only for them to flee at the sight of the serpent coiled beneath his pillow, a divine warning from the god she mocked. The Senate watched in disgust but dared not speak. Rome had faced wars, plagues, invasions, yet none had so deeply rotted its soul. Behind every senator, every general, there was a secret, a weakness Messalina could exploit. Through her spies and lovers, she built an invisible empire of blackmail, trading pleasure for obedience. Silence for power. Rome's laws meant nothing when her word could destroy a man overnight. She even poisoned Marcus Venetius, a consul who spurned her advances. His death a quiet convulsion in his villa, blamed on fever by the fearful scribes. Her alliances with Claudius's freedmen, Narcissus, Callistus, Pallas, soured as she murdered their kin, like the scholar Polybius, whose bloodied scrolls littered the palace floors. They, once her puppets, began to plot in shadows deeper than her own. They say she even built a private house, a palace of sin hidden behind temple walls, where she forced noble women to serve as her companions. Senators and generals were summoned under false pretenses, only to find themselves trapped in shameful acts recorded by her attendants. No one left that place innocent. One soldier later said, "Blood washes off. Shame never does. Why did she do it?" Some say lust without limit. Others say power disguised as pleasure. But perhaps it was something colder, a need to control a world that tried to control her. Each conquest gave her proof that Rome itself could kneel. Her victims wore laurel crowns and armor, yet before her they trembled like slaves. And in her web, even the stars of the stage and the heroes of the field became threads to be pulled. Still, no empire desired lasts forever. Her recklessness grew bolder, her secrecy thinner. The guards whispered, the Senate plotted, and even Claudius, the husband she had humiliated 100 times, began to hear the truth. But the breaking point came not from lust, but from madness. In 48 A.D., while Claudius was away in Ostia, overseeing the harbors that would feed his starving city, Messalina staged her own wedding. Not a secret tryst, a full Roman ceremony, with torches blazing and priests chanting under the autumn sky. She married her lover, the ambitious Senator Gaius Silius, a man 10 years her junior, handsome as Apollo, and divorced from his noble wife at Messalina's command. They exchanged vows in the gardens, her children as witnesses, heirlooms of the Claudian line piled high, as if an offering to a new reign. Was it a backchic right gone mad, or a bold bid for the throne? With Silius to rule as her consort and Britannicus as puppet prince, Tacitus pondered the folly. She coveted the name of wife, as if the title alone could crown her unchallenged queen. For the empire it was unthinkable, for Claudius unforgivable. When news reached him, delivered by the frantic Narcissus, the emperor laughed, a hollow bark to mask his dread, until the evidence piled high, witnesses, vows, the very rings of power. Then the laughter died. He returned to Rome with soldiers at his back, the Praetorian Guard sworn to his side by promises of gold and the freedman's silver tongue. Messalina, once the most powerful woman in the empire, was cornered in her gardens. the same gardens where she had once ruled through pleasure and fear. She clutched her children, Octavia's wide eyes mirroring her mother's terror. Britannicus too young to grasp the storm. The Vestal Virgin Vibidia, high priestess of Vesta's eternal flame, knelt before Claudius, pleading for mercy. Remember the mother of your heirs. Historians say she tried to plead for mercy, her voice a silken thread fraying in the wind. When no answer came, she fled to the gardens of Lucullus, ironic sanctuary in the paradise stolen from the dead Asiaticus. There, with her mother Domitia Lepid at her side, a woman who had scorned her in life but pitied her now. Messalina begged for a dagger, but her hands shook. The blade slipped from trembling fingers. She could command empires to kneel, yet could not command her own end. A soldier, weary of her sobs, drove his sword through her heart in a single, merciful thrust. The woman who had enslaved Rome through desire died not in ecstasy or glory, but in panic and blood. Her body was dragged away like refuse from a feast. Her statues were smashed, her name carved from stone in the Senate's vengeful decree of damnatio memoriae. Rome tried to forget, but it never could. Even now, her story lingers, not in temples or triumphs, but in whispers. Ancient pens like Tacitus and Suetonius painted her as a monster of the bed and blade, their words laced with the bias of victors. Agrippina's memoirs fueling the fire to scorch her rival's memory. Juvenal satires howled her name as synonym for vice. The Meretrix Augusta, whose shadow eclipsed even Cleopatra's throne. Yet modern eyes peer through the haze. Was she nymphomaniac or pawn, a girl wed too young to a stuttering uncle, thrust into a viper's nest where power's price was paid in flesh? Her scandals, the brothel marathons, the kin-slayings, the mock weddings, may swell with rumor, but the core endures, a woman who dared wield Rome's forbidden fruits as weapons. Surviving cameos whisper her softer side, Messalina guiding Claudius's chariot like Ariadne to Dionysus, or cradling her children in a cornucopia of imperial promise at a bust in the Louvre, her face serene beside Britannicus, defies the erasure, a quiet rebellion against history's hammer. The ruins of her palace still stand on the Palatine Hill. Tourists wander through them, taking photos beneath broken arches, oblivious to the echoes. But if you listen closely, the silence hums, because history remembers what stone tries to hide, that the most dangerous power in Rome was not forged in war, but whispered in darkness. And sealed with a kiss I end Messalina's fall, Rome glimpsed its own reflection, an empire of gods and beasts, where virtues veil tore easily, revealing the endless hunger beneath. And in that mirror, we see not just her story but ours.